For a Workers' Chamber, Part 10. Right. At the same time, there are other groups that also need to be represented, even if what they do is not formal paid work. These include carers who contribute immensely to society through the support of the sick and disabled, giving them support and a degree of independence and dignity. These people and those they serve also need to be represented because of the way they are being hit by government policies aimed at saving money for the rich. They have also suffered repeated benefit cuts since Margaret Thatcher's 1979 election victory. Like the unemployed, they are also regularly accused of fraud. The current highly unfair work capability assessment has seen thousands of them thrown out of benefit, including those seriously ill and obviously unfit for work. The assessment was introduced by Tony Blair's New Labour on the basis of a model of illness created by the Unum Health Insurance Company in America, which explicitly assumes that most of those on long-term sickness or disability benefit are malingerers. Indeed, New Labour organised a conference where this was the explicit theme. Such workers would similarly find their status raised if they were also given suitable parliamentary representation. It goes without saying that Mussolini's fascist corporativism should be absolutely rejected. Like Saint Simon, Mussolini's corporatism from the first was elitist and technocratic. He stated when he began setting up the system that he only wanted the elite of the working class to hold power. Mussolini's claim that a corporative chamber is the only form of democracy appropriate to the 20th century, because it overcomes geographical and party loyalties, is also clearly wrong. People naturally feel a strong connection to their home areas and wish to see them improved. At the same time, the party system is necessary as a defence against the totalitarian dictatorship Mussolini created and of which his chamber of fasces and corporations was an integral part. Under fascism, corporativism was not intended to empower the workers, but to subordinate them and their organisations to the capitalists and the state. It was the very opposite of what the Italian unions and Socialist Party intended when they made their demand for a constituent assembly of labour. Nevertheless, a workers' chamber should have the same structure as the House of Trades, Guild Assembly and Chamber of Fasces and Corporations, in that it should be organised according to industry, with representation also given to carers, the unemployed and disabled. The existing parliamentary system represents them as citizens and consumers, as discussed by D.G.H. Cole in Guild Socialism Restated, even though this is distorted by the massive influence of capital. It is as workers that the working class need to be represented, in exactly the same way as the TUC represents the interests of the various workers in its constituent trade unions. Simply creating a second chamber, open only to members of the working class but without such an industrial structure, will be discriminatory against the other classes without doing anything for the working class themselves. They will be subject to the same capitalist ideological hegemony that has created working class conservatives, who consistently vote against their own class interests. The result would be another parliamentary chamber whose members, although working class, share the same prejudices and hostility to working class empowerment as the MPs from the upper and middle classes, perhaps even more so, due to their isolation from the rest of their class. The Yugoslav communists attempted to prevent the emergence of a permanent class of worker managers isolated from the rest of the workforce by limiting the amount of time individuals could spend on the works committees in order to make sure as many people as possible had the opportunity to serve on them. They also made their political representatives delegates, who could be recalled by their constituents if they were dissatisfied with them in order to keep them in touch with the people they were intended to represent. Cole was not in favour of the delegate system, but it would do much to prevent working class MPs in the workers' chamber becoming isolated from their constituents and becoming a professional managerial body, sharing the same class prejudices against the workers as so many other MPs. As for the arguments against the involvement of the workers in Parliament, based on the supposed failings of the corporative system of the late 50s to the end of the 70s, these can be rebutted on the continuing poor performance of the economy under neoliberalism, compared to the growth of the economy during the period of economic planning. The Cambridge academic Ha-Jun Chan has pointed this out in his book 23 Things They Don't Tell You About Capitalism, in which he shows that governments are also capable of managing business and are still engaged in economic planning and supporting industry through subsidising research and development. Quite apart from the fact that Marx took the idea of socialist economic planning from capitalism itself and the way firms are run. Similar points have been made by John Quiggin in his book Zombie Economics, How Dead Ideas Still Walk Among Us, Princeton University Press, 2010, which also attacks privatisation, cuts to welfare spending and free market privatisation. Thatcherite neoliberalism has also created a destructive corporativism through the domination of elite businessmen and industrialists in Parliament and economics. These have enriched themselves at the expense of their employees, the disabled and the unemployed. At the same time, their ideas have devastated whole sectors of the economy, which have been allowed to decline according to free market dogma. Chan in his book states that partly nationalised businesses, or those with worker managers, such as the system of worker participation in Germany and Austria, are far more stable than those run in the interests of shareholders. The state and employees have a more enduring interest in maintaining their company's existence and profitability, while shareholders typically switch investments much more quickly if they feel that they are not going to get a suitable return for their investment. As a result, businesses on the continent owned wholly or partly by the state, or on which workers participate in management, tend to last longer than enterprises run solely in the interests of the shareholders. Thus, a workers' chamber would have greater interest in supporting industry and expanding it than those businessmen purely interested in their own personal profit, who acquire companies only to strip them of their assets and sell them on. The MPs in the workers' chamber need not all be members of the same party, and it is to be expected that they would represent the different parties now competing in British politics. But they would have to work in the industries they represent and show that they had their constituents' interests at heart and had actively worked to improve them. This would encourage the political parties to turn their focus back to working for those parts of society that are not drawn from the managers and proprietors. These representatives may not all be members of the trades unions. It will be difficult for a member of the workers' chamber to be elected without union support, but the chamber should be kept formally separate from the unions. The trade unions are still regarded with considerable suspicion, and any form of connection between the chamber and the unions will be regarded with hostility as an extension of union power. Though I have also no doubt that such a chamber itself would be treated in the same way anyway. Furthermore, the trade unions would also be able to retain an oppositional role, checking the authority of the workers' delegates if they are seen to act against the interests of working people. The model for this is the system the Germans and Austrians use for electing the workers' representatives, in their system of industrial co-determination. The trade unions may arrange the elections, but the workers elected to the various boards need not be members of the trade union. The same approach could be made at the level of national politics in the workers' chamber. It may also be possible to link the workers' chambers with a system of workers' representatives in industry, similar to the works councils in Germany and the connection between the factory councils and producers' chambers in communist Yugoslavia, and the abandoned system of Whitley councils in Britain. The 1974 Bullock Report recommended a system in which British workers should be represented and comprise up to 50% of the managers and company boardrooms. Although a white paper was published, the idea was dropped due to opposition from business and a lack of enthusiasm from the unions. Despite this, Theresa May, in her election campaign as the new Prime Minister by the Conservative Party in August 2016, made noises about having workers' representatives at management level. Such worker managers could make official contact with the workers' MPs in Parliament through official bodies similar to the NEDCs that form part of the British corporatist system. If this is done, then it would transform British industry some way towards the system of self-managing guilds invited by Cole, Hobson and Orridge, and the left-wing fascist corporatists Spirito and Panunzio. This would not necessarily entail nationalisation. As Tony Crosland pointed out in his books The Future of Socialism and The Conservative Enemy, it is possible to have the advantages of nationalisation through particular policies, like graded taxation, without taking industries into state ownership. Such a system would also go some way to creating the new conception of property Spirito discussed, by shifting power away from the shareholders and back to the managers and workers. Such a system would have many of the features of the guild system, but adapted for a system of private ownership and multi-party democracy. Of course, much could be done without the creation of a workers' chamber simply through the existence of a strong socialist movement, which took seriously its task of representing the needs and interests of the working class and salaried employees against business and management. But the Labour Party has been seriously weakened through the rise of New Labour under Tony Blair and the entry of Thatcherite free market ideology, which has seen it abandon its founding purpose of representing their interests in pursuit of support from business and the middle classes. It's possible that these developments could also be weakened or reversed through the rise of a movement demanding a workers' chamber in Parliament. The establishment of a workers' chamber in Parliament will be greeted with the same immense hostility that is poured upon any real attempt to empower the working class. This may make it difficult or even impossible to set up. Nevertheless, such a chamber would form a real bulwark against the corruption of British politics by capitalism and the disenfranchisement of the working and lower middle classes, now being impoverished and excluded from power and government. And that concludes for Workers' Chamber. I hope you have enjoyed it and found it stimulating. Thank you for listening.